And we are recording. I've literally just finished the live review of Rumble. I was going to go to sleep. Then I come across a video from the same guy we just reviewed last night, Moon again. It was from a year earlier, saying something about Clockwork Orange. How a Clockwork Orange tried to let you know, something like that. So I thought I'd react to that, and it's like, wow, 39 minutes long or something. So I don't want to speak too much through it, because I'll never get it finished and I won't ever be able to do editing on it, because it'll be too big to let me get into Canva. So it'll be going out raw, but at least I'll have the intro and outro. So let's get straight into it. Just Peter reacts. Why not? Let's get straight into it. Right, let's get it up. Have a looky. Let's do it. Let's just go.
A Clockwork Orange is one of my favourite movies, as the film shows us the disturbing truth.
I liked it. There were certain scenes in it I didn't like, obviously, because there was a little bit of a Nancy Grapey type scene,
that your life and reality might not be as real as it seems. Set in the 1960s in Northern England, the movie gives us a glimpse at the horrors of secret government operations. I'm talking about operations like MK.
And these kind of operations did go on, and this film was just showing it. I mean, come on, it was Stanley Kubrick. How many times does he have to be within the conspiracy kind of modes? He's always there, isn't he, in the background? Well, he was. Now he's gone, There you go. Project MKUltra, the CIA's program research and behavioral modification, 1977, Wednesday, August 9th. I was a year old in nearly a month. Wow, crazy.
Ultra, mind control, social engineering, and government psychological operations were deeply layered throughout every aspect of society, and the dangers of this are exactly what Clockwork Orange warns us of. And that's why more than 50 years later, and the movie's message is more relevant than ever. But to understand why, we need to dive straight into the story.
It is more relevant than ever. I mean, even if we're not mind controlled in the same way as it showed in the movie, but we are through TV, through propaganda and the news, that kind of stuff, through false doctrines, we're controlled through umpteen different kinds of ways, There's loads of variables when it comes to that.
The film opens to a long and uncomfortable shot of a man staring intensely into the camera. The iconic angle and drawn-out pan is known as the Kubrick stare. He did this in other films like Full Metal Jacket and The Shining.
I made a thumbnail for this, and I just couldn't get it to give them black makeup around the eye. Kind of got bowler hats and white suits, but it doesn't look like them. But it's cool. It's cool enough.
As it implies, the characters.
And there you go, Full Metal Jacket and Jack from The Shining. They're all kind of psychopathic. They've all got that stare. Stanley Kubrick stare. There you go.
The peak of their derangement and is crossing the line into insanity. And so it should be telling that this man is already there at just the beginning of the movie. And he is our protagonist, Alexander Dalich. He is sitting in a room laden with erotic plastic figurines.
I mean, that's in the 70s. He looks so much different now. He looks so much different.
Along with his band of thugs, Georgie, Dim and Pete, which he labels them as his droogs. The men are all drinking a mixture of milk laced with alcohol and
My droogies, yeah, they kind of made it like they had a dialect of their own, but in old kind of Northern English accent type things. It was pretty mad.
other drugs, and Alex ominously tells the audience that it makes someone ready for a little bit of the old ultra-violence, making it clear they are planning on doing some terrible things. Now they start their evening...
Milk mixed with druggies. I mean, that's a good shot. I mean, that's in an actual underpass somewhere near London, probably. I don't know where it is, but it's a real underpass where they beat the crap out of the tramp. People have been there to visit and see if it's still there, and it's still there. But that shot with the long shadows, that's ace. That's fantastic, man. That's good. That's good directing.
By patrolling the dilapidated landscape of their city, where they find an old homeless man drinking and singing under a bridge. Alex then pushes his cane into the man's stomach, and the man tells Alex to do him in, because it's not worth living in a world without law and order.
We don't want want to live anyway. Not in a stinking world like this.
You see, despite men being sent to the moon and the apparent progression of the world, nobody's paying. Next, we see a rival gang dressed in Nazi clothes,
A moon. I know the name of your channel is Moon, but nobody went to the moon. Nobody can get to the moon. Nobody will ever be able to get to the moon. Nobody will ever know what it is until we go and be with the Lord. And maybe he will let us know. Hallelujah.
committing an unspeakable crime, all contrasted by the beauty of the setting and the classical score. And then
it's
suddenly,
awful.
Alex and Astrug step out of the shadows,
I mean-
taunt the rival
The fight between the two gangs, that wasn't bad. But, when it came to, the woman bits and that, not good.
gang, then savagely beat them in a
How
fight.
do they think these things up in their head? Don't get me wrong, I liked the film. I liked it for its weirdness. I had to give it a look, but as parts of it makes me feel really uncomfortable, obviously.
Showing them that this is their territory. However, as they're laying into them, the police arrive and Alex and his crews get away in a car, speeding out of the city in a stolen car and into the country. As they speed away, they force all other cars off the road, causing chaos wherever they are. They have nothing to lose. They are the epitome of chaos. And then eventually they arrive at a house, and
That's it. Instigators and the epitome of chaos, absolutely. And look how futuristic. They try and make it look kind of old, like old clothes type thing, but worn in a weird way. Bowler hats, suspenders, even bloody jockstrap type things on the outside. And then a car that looks futuristic, but it looks like it was futuristic from the 60s, from how they would have looked at it.
transition inside, where we find a man writing on a typewriter,
And this-
who's about to face an unfortunate
This guy in the movie is weird anyway. He's so like, I don't know. Oh man, he's so weird. It is a strange movie.
fate, as Alex manages to manipulate his wife into opening the door, and when ever since the film was released in 1971.
Just singing in the rain. What a glorious feeling. I'm happy.
And then once they're finished, the gang makes their way back to the hideout, and they refuel by ordering more Milk Plus, all while the woman is singing some Beethoven in the background. Here Alex is
And that's the thing. He's got a thing for the classical, hasn't he? And that's what they kind of mind control him into thinking he doesn't like. He loves it, and he stiffens up and all that. Can't move, gets pain. Yeah, madness. And I think they can't do these things to people. Absolutely.
deeply enraptured, but Dim begins blowing a raspberry, so Alex immediately reacts by smashing him in the crotch with his cane. Dim then gets angry and starts to rebel against Alex's leadership,
What did you do that for?
but Alex intimidates him into backing down, reverting back to a primal hierarchical system. And then finally we see Alex heading home, where he lives in a rundown concrete apartment building.
Excuse
Inside
me.
he has a cupboard filled with stolen watches and money, a sign of his extensive criminal career.
The size of
And the
that
only way he
55 note.
relaxes is by
I have to go back to it. Sorry, guys. That at the top there, that is an old. Oh, no, sorry, it's not. I thought it was a 50. It's 20. It's just because it's so big. I thought it was a 50. Because 50s were massive. But that's as far as they go up to now in Scotland. 50s, you don't get £100 notes. Not anymore. But I thought that was a 50. It's not. It's a 20. It's an old 20. And it's an English 20 as well. Well, it would be. It's in England.
watches and money, a sign of his extensive criminal career. And the only way he relaxes is by vigorously enjoying the music of Beethoven and fixating on a violent sculpture.
There you go.
And so by this point in the movie, it's clear that one of the main themes
Beethoven
is
van
dualism.
Ludwig
You can
van
see it in the
Beethoven.
setting, incredible beauty combined with a bleak dystopic landscape. Horrible things happen in these places, but the score is always the finest, most elegant classical music. Even the language that people speak is a mixture of modern English, Shakespeare, and Russian.
That's what I was saying. It came up with their own kind of dialect. They amalgamated a few things together and got like a hybrid, you know?
An odd combination that sounds both sophisticated and crude. Now, Alex is the most contradictory part of the movie. He's intelligent, handsome, and a lover of music and the fine arts, but he's also sadistic and ruthless in his brutality, delighting in treats violence like a rhythmic dance, and we can see he is associated with beautiful classical music, getting the same kind of pleasure from both at once. And when he's listening to his music, his mind is occupied by visions of death and destruction. He loves the chaotic world he lives in because it gives him complete
I
freedom.
wonder how he would equate like that type of smooth, chilling music, you know, to death though and destruction. Isn't that weird?
To act on his dark desires. But before we continue, I want to talk about a video sponsor.
Let's not do that. Let's forward that a little bit then. Let's get past that. Thank you very much, Mr. Mooney. Here we go.
Inclined to agree with the old man from the start of the movie. The world is rotten because the structure has fallen
He does,
apart,
he says it's rotten.
letting people like Alex run rampant and terrorize society. And it's this sense of chaos and its terrible consequences that actually inspired Thomas Hobbes, as he described in his book Leviathan. Now, Thomas Hobbes saw nature and its lawlessness leads to the domination of the strong over the weak, the same as it is in all of the animal kingdom, with his famous words describing primitive life as nasty, brutish, and short. But it's from this setting of chaos that the desire for order takes hold. People subjected to it are more than willing to trade away their freedom for a rigid structure. And for Hobbes, the more rigid the structure, the better. His ideal government exercises complete control.
And what he's wearing there, that purple kind of suit thing, it's like an exaggerated kind of mix between a ringmaster's suit and, I don't know, some kind of weird tux.
Society like an all-powerful Leviathan. It's only when everyone in society submits to one ruling body that peace is
See the star. We see the star.
finally guaranteed. Otherwise, factions grow and infighting tears society apart. The problem with this account, though, is that it relies on Hobbes' assumption that human nature can be changed to conform them to society, because he almost sees people as machines, completely guided by external causes and effects. So by building a Leviathan, the people would naturally fall into place based on their own instincts of self-preservation. But the problem here is that human nature just isn't that simple. A good upbringing and environment can't really guarantee that someone will be good as well, as Alex has already shown us. We see Alex's home life in the next scene, as he effortlessly tells his mother that he
And it's strange what his mum. I mean, it's like it's the 70s, obviously. It's meant to seem a bit futuristic and old at the same time, and a bit Shakespearean. It's all over the place. Bit 60s kind of wallpaper, clothes, bit exaggerated, and then purple hair. Wow, mental. Love purple. I'm just not in here. Not like that, anyway.
won't be going to school.
Don't want to live anyway. Not in a stinking water like this.
There's clearly no discipline in his life, as neither parents even challenges him. He's the dominant one of the house, and when his mum does attempt to wake him up for school, it's always to no avail, because Alex is in charge. He determines what he'll do, not someone above him. No one can control him, or at least it seems that way. Once Alex finally gets out of bed, he walks through his house in underwear, where he stumbles across his correctional officer sitting on his mother's bed waiting for him. Now the man tells Alex that he knows what he's been up to in the evenings, and that he's one step away from prison next time he's caught. But as the man is telling Alex this, he crosses the line from inappropriate to predatory, ending his lecture with a smack to the groin. The last thing he tells Alex is key. The man says that the government
Didn't think he'd actually show that bit, but yeah, smack in the crotch. Nasty.
and the state have been studying people like Alex for over a century, but they haven't found a reason for their crimes or a way to control people like him. Now, Alex isn't really paying attention to the correctional officer, or anything about the government trying to control people like him. This just doesn't really faze him. Alex thinks that no one can control him, no one can influence his mind, and so the next thing he does is go to pick up two young women and almost
Yeah, that's what that was wearing. It kind of reminds me like a ringmaster thing. I don't know, and a bit like, I don't know, the Renaissance period type clothes. I don't know. Weird. Bit French as well. I don't know, guys.
comical scene, and as we transition to later in the evening, the Droogs are waiting for Alex outside his apartment. Now by this point they've become discontent with their earnings, along with Alex's leadership. His disrespect towards the group has made the people feel resentful towards him, and so they start demanding a new way, with George in charge and Dim as his henchman. At first, Alex seems to capitulate, and they agree to pursue a larger score, but this is all a trick. No one's gonna control Alex, no one's gonna be his boss, and so as they're walking across a concrete marina, Alex savagely beats George and Dim, descending them flying into the water. Then he rubs salt in the wound by offering Dim his hand, but instead cutting him with a knife. The slow motion dance of the violence combined with the music and the concrete landscape in the background makes for one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, because Alex is asserting his leadership and his mind.
It is actually a good scene. It is actually a good scene, the way they do it. I keep looking over to the right screen to see if he's there, because I was doing it live, but no, you're not. But it is a very good scene, and the way they slow it down as well. It must have been well choreographed. It must have took a while to get that sorted.
This seemingly shows that no one can control Alex. He's always going to be in charge.
But I want to know what his actual point is about what Clockwork Orange trying to tell us. I mean, I think I know, obviously, but he hasn't got to that point. Like I say, it's a fair bit to go yet, anyway.
and he thinks that everyone will be happy to continue along with his plan. And so Alex and the group decides that they're going to attack a wealthy yoga instructor who lives alone in a country mansion just with her cats. We then cut to the woman in question, who hears a knock at the door. At the door, it's Alex trying the same trick he used before to get into the writer's home. But this time, the woman doesn't let him in and calls the police because she read about the attack and his tactics in the paper. So Alex finds another way in and confronts her in her home, where of course they get into a fight. Now Alex is mostly toying with the woman until he smacks her with a phallic.
I'm not good. I was up before, but I don't want to see this bit. I don't want to see that bit. Yeah, let's get into that.
To the police, and the police aren't going to be too kind either. They abuse Alex, beat him bloody, and inform him that his victim died. And while they do this, they take glee in his suffering, just like Alex did for so many other people. With his corrections officer, the man from before who visited his home and touched him up, even spits in his face. And this is a pivotal.
That's right, it does do that. It does do that. It's disgusting. And I think that's real spit. I think they did that real. It doesn't look like fake spit. I think they real spitted it. Some kind of ritual, maybe.
Moment in Alex's story, his fall from grace, his
Degrading
awful acts,
ritual.
and his most recent betrayal of his droogs has all caught up to him. He seemed to have so much control in his life.
Think about it. It could be like a degrading. To degrade someone. You know what I mean?
But in fact he had none, and now he's going to face all of the consequences. However, it's also clear proof that the society Alex actually lives in is severely corrupt and brutal. It mirrors his own behavior. Until we meet the police, there are clear implications of course, like Alex's predatory corrections officer, or the bleak crumbling infrastructure surrounding him. There is just no order in this world, in the dystopia of 70s North England. But here we see that the authorities are just as nasty as Alex. In fact, when Alex fights back against one of the policemen, he hurts him in the same way as his corrections officer did to him. And at this
at that point, where he was on his knees, I don't think he had much choice if he was going to try and hit someone. That's the only place he could hit them.
point, considering the characters we met, you could easily say that human nature seems inherently evil, or at least self-centered. It's twisted, sadistic. There is no binding spirit. Society.
Well, if it seems inherently evil, it's because we're not fighting against flesh and blood. You know what I mean? It's against principalities and powers. You know, the devil walks about this land like a roaring lion, seeking to devour, kill, steal, and destroy. Don't let it happen, guys.
Doesn't even exist here. There is no community. In Alex's society, the imbalances of power and the lack of oversight necessarily leads people to abusing their power in the worst ways imaginable. No one has any control. It's like a twisted version of Hobbes' ideal society, where the power of the state actually creates a brutal free-for-all. But whilst it might seem like an overly pessimistic take to call human nature evil, it's really not that ridiculous. The ancient Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu held this view, and it remains relevant to this day, transcending endless centuries.
No idea who Sun Tzu is. But if he's a philosopher, then he thinks a lot.
Of thought. Now, Sun Tzu saw human impulses as generally evil because our most basic instincts are centered completely around.
There's goodness, obviously. We can have good hearts, but at the end of the day, we are born in sin, so it is easier to do evil. Not that it always feels good. Like it's for me, it's going against the grain, but yeah. We're born into sin, so yes, I suppose it's going to feel more inherently evil.
Ourselves. And whilst they're a necessary part of survival, following them blindly leads to the chaos of nature and the evil acts that we've already described. If you were starving and your friend had food, you really wouldn't hesitate to steal it, if you're following your basic desires to the letter. For Sun Tzu, it's only by tempering and managing these impulses that you can do good, until it eventually becomes your default response. And it's through this cultivation that people can rise above their base animal instincts. But in the world of A Clockwork Orange, as well as our own today, we don't promote this sort of behavior. In fact, we actively hinder it. As the policemen say in the movie, violence makes violence, and Alex has been set up to fail. I
really do think that was real spit. I do think that was real spit.
Always been set up to fail since the beginning, and the state only responds to chaos with increased force and pressure, instead of actually trying to get to the roots of why people's lives are so miserable in the first place. But as we see later in the movie, these corrupt institutions are often ineffective, fueled not by justice but by vengeance and sadism. The policemen that arrest Alex don't care about his victim. Alex's correctional officer even
they just want to mess about him. They don't give a shit that he had a victim out there in the first place. They just want to mess him about. Of course, not that he's a good character or anything, but they just want to F him over.
When he tells him about his victim's death, as these corrupt institutions only get more power from the misery, all while making people's environments harsher and more unnatural. But the ideal for these authoritarians is still out of reach. Eventually, as they ratchet up the pressure, the whole system collapses under the pressure, or explodes in violence. Instead, the true goal of these regimes is to make their people helpless, to strip them of their free will so that they can fit into whatever mold they like. And it's already clear that the world that Alex lives in is designed this way. The Brutus architecture and the concrete landscape suck the life out of everything. Dictators often bulldoze
And the place where he went to prison, it certainly did look like a real prison.
history and erect concrete monoliths of misery in their place. Romania's dictator Nicole Ceausescu is particularly guilty of this. He bulldozed and destroyed centuries of art and beauty, stripping his country of its heritage and replacing it with grey, soulless concrete blocks and collective.
And they are soulless, aren't they? There's nothing nice to look at them. I mean, I know it's for convenience. I know it's economically more sound, I suppose, in some ways, but yeah, it doesn't look nice. It does suck the soul out of the landscape, because there is no landscape there. You haven't even got a skyline, because they're so close together, that as well. Grey, and grey.
Architecture, helping remind the people of their place and the brutal majesty of the state. In reality, it's very depressing to live in, and this works to suck your soul. It makes your life depressing. It makes you conform to the society around you, sapping people's passion and their free will. In fact, the philosopher Michel Foucault gives us an excellent way of visualizing how this happens. In his book Discipline and Punish, he analyzes the idea of the panopticon, a certain design for prisons. Now, the basic idea is that each area of the prison should be dominated by a large central tower with an observation deck out the side of the prison. Then the rest of the prison should be laid out surrounding this tower, so that anywhere you go, you're within view of the guards in the tower. They might not always be watching, in fact they might only be looking at you very rarely, but you don't know that. The potential of someone watching at any time effectively means that you're always being watched, and prison designers soon found that the
Well, that's true. If you don't know you're not being watched, you just got to think you're being watched. Of course.
prisoners living under the panopticon were more obedient, and this is an effect that authoritarian society has to cultivate. If someone might be watching you at any time, then nothing is ever truly private. But this design didn't just end up in prisons. Lots of schools follow the same principles, but the largest and most important panopticon is society-wide, and it's already here. You see, Foucault knew this was a recent development. The Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution created our modern ideas of liberty and freedom, but it also gave the states more
Yeah, and the Statue of Liberty doesn't represent freedom at all. Probably represents the exact opposite in bondage, because that is not a lady. That is like there's Invictus and all that. I think Apollo. They're all kind of in that kind of pose and that kind of look. So yeah, no, that's nothing to do with freedom.
was to become even more authoritarian. As we found out, the modern age has given states unprecedented control over
And there you go. You seen that? Let me just take it back a little bit there again. Right.
was to become even more authoritarian. As we found out, the modern
There you go. Apple Pro. Bite out the apple represents what Adam and Eve did in the garden. I know it wasn't an apple, but people say that, don't they? It's just a fruit, but that represents it. And there's a bite out of it, meaning that they're promoting sin. I think.
age has given states unprecedented control over people's private lives, and it's this blanket psychological control that is so worrying about the recent history of surveillance. And phone cameras are just one aspect of this, where every embarrassing moment or mistake of your life is recorded and immortalized for the rest of time. But the person who actually owns the phone isn't the only one watching. If these cameras were completely safe and private, why would Mark Zuckerberg himself tape over his webcams? Why would Steve Jobs not allow his kids to have iPads? That's not even mentioning the massive security.
Yeah, isn't it funny? They're all in that kind of business. But they wouldn't allow their kids to have it. And Mr. What's his name again? Zuckerberg, aye. He tapes over his cams. See? He knows something's going on. So, yeah, absolutely. He's definitely been mind controlled. We've seen him glitching out. Therefore.
cameras in every street corner. And in the UK alone, it's estimated to have around 1 camera for every 11 people, whilst China is aiming for 1 government camera per every 2 people. Just as with the panopticon though, it's the implication that matters. Now that we're surrounded by artificial eyes, we're always living in the panopticon, and the rest of A Clockwork Orange is going to show us how terrifyingly fragile free will in modern society really is. The next thing we see is that
Right, let's get into the juicy part of it, obviously, where the mind control starts happening soon enough.
Alex has been sentenced to 14 years in prison, where he has been stripped of all of his belonging clothes and his name. He no longer has any control, and the guards make sure he feels this. But instead of being beaten down by the prison and turned into a good citizen, this all has the opposite effect, as it's implied that Alex is abused by the guards and other inmates, but he still keeps a good record of behaviour for 2
Look at the guy, giving him kisses and all that, like he's beautiful. For goodness sake, bro.
years, and into the facade
I'm
of
just
faith
slapping
and
him about like a
penitence, while
10 bob
secretly
back.
using the Bible to fantasize about violence and sadism. The other prisoners are similar. They're completely resistant to the teachings of the chaplain, and his threats of eternal damnation do nothing to change their minds, further proving the story that force and pressure won't work on everyone. He reads about a secret new experimental technique that the state is trialing in prisons. It's called the Ludovico technique, and it's rumored to
Ludovico.
keep people out of prison for good. But Alex is interested just because he wants to cut his sentence short.
Oh,
He doesn't
yeah.
really want to reform him.
Right, yeah, of course. I mean, if you were offered that before we knew anything about this kind of truth about mind control and that, and you were in prison, and you were offered, like, you're doing a long time, I don't know, say you're doing life, and you get offered this thing, if you do it, you can get released from prison, and you'll be cool, and you'll never commit crime again, but you just have to go this process of hypnosis and all that kind of crap. You would do it. You know, you'd think you'd have your life back, but yeah, I mean, this stuff is true. They mind control people without that. Look at that experiment with the screws and the guards. The guards and the prisoners. They were just college people. They were just students, and the screws, the guards, end up being really, really harsh, taking it seriously, dishing out punishment and that as though they were actually real prison guards. It's crazy, nuts, man.
Himself, but he'll do anything to have control again. However, the chaplain tells Alex not to give it any thought. He tells Alex that goodness is chosen, not something that can be forced upon someone.
Goodness comes from within. Goodness is chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man.
Without the actual choice, a good
Well,
act
that's
is just
free
a
will.
forced response without any free will involved. So Alex eventually agrees with the chaplain, but when the minister in charge of the Ludovico technique comes to the prison, Alex is quick to take his chance. Impressed by his criminal record and ruthlessness, Alex gets we learn what the Ludovico technique really is. First,
go.
Alex is drugged, then he's strapped to a chair with his eyes forced open, where he has no choice but to watch scenes of violence.
I mean, that's awful. Imagine having your eyes open like that. Yes, someone's dropping drops in it to keep them wet, but it's still got to feel awful. I mean, come on, I feel like your eyeballs are coming out. And someone could just yank them off your eyes and hurt you and stuff, so I would feel so vulnerable.
Violence and destruction, all while the drug they've injected him with makes him feel incredibly sick and nauseous, like he's paralyzed, terrified on the edge of death. It's classic aversion therapy, although the mysterious nature of the drug
Aversion,
conceals anything
yeah,
else that
it's
might
one.
be going on. Now, the doctors tell Alex that his drug-induced horror is the same thing that normal people feel in response to violence, but the words just ring hollow. On top of this, later sessions of drugging in films involve Beethoven used as the background music.
Yeah.
Alex protests, knowing that the treatment will ruin Beethoven for him, but the doctors press on, rationalizing it as a punishment for his crimes. After a torturous 2 weeks, filled with mental anguish, pain, and delusions, Alex's rehabilitation is demonstrated to the government and the prison officials in a predictably awful way, where they humiliate him by getting him to lick a man's boot and show that the treatment has made him unable to think about sex. Finally, the government minister makes a speech, saying that this treatment will end crime by hijacking people's natural impulses. The chaplain's the only man in the room who isn't
Can you
really
imagine that? Like, everybody gets horny at some point, even if you ain't got misses, so just thinking about sex make you feel ill. That would have been awful, and I bet you could do that through mind control. You know? I bet you could do that.
pleased with this. He tells the audience that Alex has no actual choice anymore. He doesn't have any free will.
Sorry if my voice is a bit gruff, guys, during this recording. It's just because I came straight from use in live stream to do this video. I'll get some sleep afterwards, I promise I will. But I'm on tonight again anyway. But yes, so I'm sounding a bit gruff because I just came straight from the live stream that we've been streaming for like nearly 7 hours. You know what I mean? Since last night. So that's why I'm sounding a bit gruff.
control over his own
I haven't slept yet and been talking all night.
body, or any control over his own mind. His dark impulses are still there, but he just lacks the free choice to act on it. The chaplain finally says that Alex isn't good, he's just helpless. But it's
So exactly. Not good at all. He's helpless. But is that rehabilitation? No. No. You'd want someone to be cured, probably through prayer and that, but medically cured as well. Not it's covering the problem and making it worse, really.
protests fall in deaf ears. And this is probably the most prophetic scene in the entire movie, because it highlights the dangerous uses of technology for thought control, years before it became so widespread in our own reality. Now, of course, when the film was made, they were experimenting with similar concepts. An obvious example is MK Ultra.
MK Ultra.
Nah, take that back, so we won't be anything in that.
Because it highlights the dangerous uses of technology for thought control, years before it became so widespread in our own reality. Now, of course, when the film was made, they were experimenting with similar concepts. An obvious example is
Have a quick look. So Project A is being set up as a means to continue present work in the general field. LSD, so you know it's drugs, obviously, psychedelic drugs, hallucinogenics, until September 11th, 1954. Number 2, this project will include a continuation of a study of biochemical, neurophysiological, sociological and clinical psychiatric aspects of LSD, and also a study of Lysergic antagonists and drug related to Lysergic and LAER. Detailed proposal is attached. Doobie-doo. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll do that one.
MK Ultra.
MK Ultra was a government program run by the Central Intelligence Agency. Originally started as something called Bluebird in 1948-49, morphed into Artichoke, and then in 1952 became MK Ultra. It was a mind control program, a brainwashing program. The CIA was trying to learn how to control people's behavior without their knowledge.
Continuing the work of sadistic Japanese and German
And
doctors
that's
from World War
terrible.
II, the US expanded and
Without your knowledge, I mean, bad enough actually volunteering for this crap, but without your knowledge, it's bad. It's bad.
refined their interrogation techniques. Using shell companies, the CIA set up shop at army bases, prisons, and even in hospitals, looking for vulnerable people who society just wouldn't listen to. Then, without the person's consent or knowledge, they tested electric shocks, hypnosis techniques, sensory deprivation, physical abuse, and most importantly, incredibly high doses of LSD, along with other
Why? Why do that to someone? Incredibly high doses. That's dangerous. Let's slip up forward a little bit.
psychoactive drug. Although it actually started at the end of World War II, the project officially began 8 years later, when the CIA director at the time,
Okay, I'm not live. I keep thinking I'm live. That's probably why. Alright, no shifties anymore. We're nearly halfway through it.
ordered these experiments to be consolidated under the MK Ultra name. The justification for all of this was that in response to mind control experiments conducted on American prisoners by Soviets and the Chinese, the CIA then saw mind control as an arms race, and they weren't going to lose. However, there were other aims that weren't
That's
mentioned
the
by the
thing.
CIA in their reports.
But
Being
they're in it together. It was not like it was a race, a real race. They were all in it together.
able to influence a foreign agent to act as an unwilling assassin was a salivating prospect to the CIA.
Their main objective was to create what they called hypno-programmed assassins, people who would kill on command through drugs and hypnotism. The objective was
Super soldiers that will go out and do things for them. You know, correct what needs to be correcting. For the old man downstairs, eh?
to get people to go and commit an act of murder against their moral code
Yeah.
and have no memory of their programming.
as was being able to find moles in their own organization, or even exploring methods for wider control of the American people.
Are you aware of Operation Midnight Climax?
Those were the safe houses in San Francisco.
Well, that was the brothel version of it.
Yeah.
Where they lured these Johns into these brothels and then dosed them up with LSD and studied them.
Joe Rogan, he talks about some truthful things and that, but he's just another be chill gatekeeper type person.
In 1955, one of the CIA's darkest experiments would begin in San Francisco. As part of the CIA's multitude of experiments under the wing of MKUltra, one mind control experiment was especially disturbing, a top-secret program called Operation Midnight Climax. Now, the operation began with the CIA purchasing an apartment in San Francisco and transforming this place into a makeshift brothel. A brothel wired up to recording units, martini booths, toilets.
Why? What the hell can I learn from that? That sounds as though it's got to be really Nazi.
And one-way and two-way
Wow.
mirrors. Next, the CIA sent undercover agents to go out and hire random sex workers. Soon after, the CIA would then blackmail these prostitutes, whilst also providing favors for these sex workers. Favors like criminal immunity and huge wads of cash. And in return, the prostitutes would lure unknowing men into the CIA's experiment. In the first brothel, prostitute informants would administer psychoactive drugs to unsuspecting clients. According to the journalist Gary Kamiya, certain individuals, the prostitutes, would covertly administer this material in accordance with the CIA's instructions, with one of the agents telling the Telegraph Hill.
Right, here we go. Look, got it, but I was aware of the financial scheme. Could be dangerous due to the highly unorthodox nature of these activities and the considerable risk incurred by these individuals. It is impossible to require that they provide a receipt for these payments, or that they indicate these precise manner in which funds were spent, he wrote in his report. But the MKUltra team considered the first San Francisco safe house such a success that they opened a second one across the Golden Gate Bridge in Maine County. White also oversaw this operation. You could bring people in for quickies after lunch, one MKUltra agent told Mark of the Telegraph Hill address. The suburban Marin County location, on the other hand, provided a greater sense of isolation and secrecy, allowing for more elaborate and ridiculous experiments. Sure, there were experiments, sure.
That you could bring people in for quickies after lunch. So over time,
that's
once the
good.
brothel was set up,
Good.
hundreds of men and prostitutes would be put into the rooms throughout the city. And in these rooms, the CIA operatives would be hiding within these walls, behind a two-way or one-way mirror, watching everything that happened in the room. And then eventually, prostitutes would be secretly instructed by these operatives to go to the bathroom. Then the next minute, the men waiting around in the bed would be unknowingly drugged with LSD, sprayed by aerosols, or had their drinks spiked, which when combined with the women and blackmail, made the men especially willing to divulge their deepest secrets.
And that's what you get told to watch out for when you're out and about drinking in pubs and clubs and all that. For people spiking you. But yeah, government were doing it.
Because this was the ultimate aim of the operation. It was a test to see how open and talkative drugs and sex made these men. How could they manipulate someone's mind to tell someone their darkest secrets? The escorts would then stay with these men for hours, talking them up and asking them about their jobs, and the men just couldn't stop talking. And it was this operation that showed a lot of hope for the CIA's quest in mind control, so much so that they would actually open up a second brothel next to the Golden Gate Bridge.
Wow.
However, over the following years...
Yeah, brothel. Yeah, for science, guys. Brothels for science, because brothels have lots to do with science, isn't they? Oh yeah, I mean, human body, biology, that kind of stuff. Do you really think that's the kind of science they were looking at? No, they were doing biological stuff, obviously, but you know what I'm saying, gadgets and gadgets.
Moral questions started to be raised, and the considerable risks that came from this operation in terms of negative publicity and trust in the public added extra pressure for there to be measurable results from these
Wow.
experiments. But unfortunately for the CIA, they were forced to admit that this method of mind control really wasn't providing enough reliable data to be of any real use for the CIA's mind control ambitions. And so eventually the operation...
Anytime pause the video and read these things, it's shocking. It's shocking.
would come to an end and all records would be destroyed by the CIA in 1973. In fact, the only reason we know any of this is because of a whistleblower who worked for the US State Department, as he remembered that the CIA had actually stored records of this top secret operation in a warehouse, and these records only detailed the financial records of the operation, showing how much the prostitutes were paid along with the cost of operating the San Francisco brothels. But by understanding the finances of this operation, the whistleblower could piece together the story again. And that's why after the whistleblower testified this information to Congress, he would eventually write a book about MKUltra, one of the first to expose the CIA's many crimes. But it was after becoming one of the main voices, speaking out against the CIA's mind control experiments, that the whistleblower would eventually find the true damage of these operations. Because according to Tom O'Neill, the reason this whistleblower faded into obscurity and stopped speaking out against the CIA's secret experiments,
Because he probably had to, or he would have get croaked, stone dead. Guaranteed. He had to get out of there, without a doubt, or he's gone. Gone, dead, buried buried.
was because thousands of people every day would camp out in his garden, constantly claiming that they were victims of the CIA's MKUltra operations. Every day, hundreds of people would find the whistleblower, convinced that the CIA had done something to them, that they were also victims of MKUltra.
You can see the reactions to some of what they do. Yeah, it's awful. Awful, man. It's not good.
And it was after this that it became clear that operations like Midnight Climax were sowing some very deep seeds of mistrust against the entire US government across the country. In fact, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was also a victim of these.
Oh, Ted. The Unabomber. Yeah, but it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And it's all in the name of science, guys.
Sorts of experiments, as he was also rumored to have been a part of MKUltra, as over the course of 3 years, he was psychologically tortured and subjected to abuse, while his brain was monitored by electrodes, all without his consent, and then he was made to watch his own abuse back over and over again. Just like Alex in our movie, the experiments altered his mind and mental.
Can you imagine that? You getting abused, going through that torture, and then being made to watch your own abuse through and through and through. That's sick, man. So sick.
Significantly. And I mean, he was already troubled, but lost thing that his suffering at the hands of the CIA was actually responsible for his later crimes, as they trace his paranoia and distrust of the government's control back to these awful experiments that ruined his life. Now, even though Ted does actually deny that these experiments were what caused his delusions, he did only ever begin experiencing homicidal thoughts and tendencies just a year after the experiments on him concluded. But finally, when MKUltra and all of these experiments were exposed, the CIA rushed to burn all of the evidence, and unfortunately, they mostly succeeded. Only one could share documents were ever leaked afterwards, which prompted a
Sure, they went and burned them. They don't need to burn them. They're all in it together. Of course they didn't burn them. It's all bullshit. Bullshit.
few show trials and really nothing more. And it's really doubtful that the CIA and any other government branch ever stopped there. That was just the last time they were caught, and the techniques perfected in MKUltra are still used to this day. But thought control has moved past direct intervention, with corporations and governments mostly interested in engineering a more subtle kind of societal control. The general idea is to control people by subliminally pushing them towards certain behaviors, more in line with the state's ideals. The idea came from a relatively new field of study called behavioral
TikTok being beamed into everybody's heads there. A likely story, isn't it? It's a likely story.
economics, which teaches that most people are stupid, short-sighted, and incapable of making the right choices for themselves, although they use the word irrational to make it easier to swallow. Therefore, to get the most out of your population, a government needs to push them towards certain choices. Latching onto this, the British government created the quote, Nudge Unit, a privatized government body dedicated to putting behavioral economics into practice. They started with small and relatively harmless suggestions, like increasing the demand of loft insulation by offering a subsidized clean-out service for people's junk. And it turned out once people didn't have to spend a day storing through cobwebs and boxes, they were 5 times more likely to insulate their lofts and save the country energy. Now this is common sense really, but then it moved forward to more sinister sorts of goals. Using the vastly expanding data collection and surveillance state, they started adding personalized threats to car tax reminders. Generic threats were replaced with threats specific to the car's make and the person who owned it. Then they even started including photos of the cars in the threat letters, like a kidnapper sending a photo of their victim along with the ransom demand. And the effectiveness of the letters tripled. Eventually the scheme moved on, trying to shift people's ideas as well as their behavior, but they soon found out that people don't want to listen to the government. However, they found a solution. Just get
Lots of different scams out there. Pyramid schemes, Ponzi schemes, they're all, I don't know if they're the same or whatever, but still, lots of scammers out there and lots of different scams. And people are falling for it, even though they're blatantly scams.
other people to be the mouthpieces of the state. And don't just take this from me, here's the Nudge Unit's view on this. Quote, someone who has developed a dislike of government interventions may be less likely to listen to messages that they perceive to come from the government. And so in such cases, the most effective strategy for changing behavior may be to use third parties or downplay government involvement in a campaign or intervention.
Hold on. So someone who has developed a dislike of government interventions may be less likely to listen to messages that they perceived to come from government. In such cases, the most effective strategy for changing behaviour may be to use third party or downplay government involvement in a campaign or intervention. Sneaky buggers, eh? Sneaky buggers.
This is a quote from Mindspace, the UK government's 2010 manifesto on how they're going to influence people's behaviour. As well as traditional government propaganda and messaging, the UK started mixing it into TV shows and on social media. And of course they can directly interfere with government broadcasting, as well as companies like Sky, Meta, Indeed, Bloomberg, Santander, the list just goes on. This gives...
Yeah, I was watching videos the other day and I never thought about it for a while, but when like Britain's Got Talent came out in 2006, 2007 or something, and X Factor and stuff, they all used to be like from like truth, people coming in and just showing the talent they had from off the street. And nowadays you got golden buzzers, everything's all polished beforehand and professional. It's not the same anymore. It's not picking talent, it's not finding talent, it's just putting the talent that they've already seen there. People are going viral and stuff. No, it's not right. They should just stop it then. It's not the same anymore.
The Nudge Unit free access to a massive portion of the media that people consume, and therefore controlling the flow of information and thus the ideas the public forms about the world. So what have they been doing with this control? Well, of course, they're pushing the government's narrative. The Nudge Unit even pressures TV broadcasters to change their main characters' personalities and stories. For example, they often push for characters to be more environmentally conscious so that they can make propaganda more digestible once those characters start spouting it. And what's even more disgusting is that this is especially prevalent in kids' TV.
Not just environmentally conscious, but pure woke, which they are not awake. So don't know why they call themselves woke. Maybe because they want to be, or they think they are.
As kids are so much more easier to influence, and thus they can then influence the parents. And so once you start noticing this, suddenly the subliminal messages get much easier to spot. I mean, take a look at this scene from the soap opera Coronation Street, where one character brings up his suspicion about the government.
You can tell you all about this, not so much me.
And the other two people in the conversation immediately shut it down as ridiculous.
Question is, who owns the media?
I don't know. Who does?
Well, that's the point. They don't want you to know. The media, banks, big business, they're all in it together, a secret.
Yeah, they just hand wave it and just say, that's garbage that we used to hear. And we did used to think that once we grew up a bit. Oh, yeah, of course, it's garbage. Then you look back on it again, it's really not. It's really not.
A global cabal.
And who exactly is this secret global cabal?
In a later scene, they discuss how suspicions about the government are actually a form of anti-Semitism.
And Griff's secret cabal owning the media and banks is also a classic anti-Semitic trope.
But social media is the best tool that...
See, everything is anti-Semitic. Absolutely everything. You could tell them that you don't like their sandals they're wearing. Anti-Semitic.
Nudge Unit has. They've already been using Meta and other companies' data collection for their own targeted nudges, like when they took Amazon's data on which people had bought candles and matches, then sent voice messages to these people through their Alexa, telling them about fire safety measures. Afterwards, they can then test their results against more data, giving them a very easy way to perfect the manipulations. And just to be clear, this has only been happening for 13 years. This is a very new unit.
I realised by the time this finishes, this video's got to be a little over an hour long. Sorry guys, it's got to be a premiere as well. So don't be there if you don't want to, but I hope you are.
For the government, and they've been exporting the Nudge Unit to other governments around the world. And so you can imagine where this would lead, and may already have done. Targeted adverts and messages sowing fear in the public, or AI-controlled shills in social media to make the government narrative seem like it's coming from the people themselves. Governments push and push at people's freedoms and autonomy all the time, only stopping when they meet strong resistance. But who actually knows about the Nudge Unit? Have you ever heard this being mentioned? Have any of your friends ever spoken about this, or your family members? No, almost nobody knows of this, even though it is the most sinister form of disguised propaganda. This is an attack on free will by interfering with people's ability to discern the truth.
Exactly. That's turning you into a robot by not your own choice.
Truth, plain and simple. However, the only difference with Alex is that his free will has been directly interfered with, as we're about to see. Now a free man, he makes his way back to his parents' apartment. His key still works, so he just walks through the front door. But here he finds someone else's stuff in his room. His parents are in the living room, and they're just reading about Alex in the paper, as he's on the
He can't get into a confrontation, can he? And he's going to straight away.
front page. The government is using the Ludovico technique as the cornerstone of its
wounded.
new policy on crime. If it works with Alex, then it'll become the standard method of dealing with these criminals. The rest of the articles on the front page are also about crime and Alex, and they're hailing it as a revolutionary new treatment. And Alex actually agrees with this, claiming to his parents that he is completely reformed. But whilst he was in prison, his parents secretly moved on without him. They've rented out his room to a lodger, gotten rid of his pet snake, and the police have sold all of Alex's possessions. Alex learns all of this as he's intimidating his dad, but when the lodger steps in, Alex is forced to back down. And then the sickness comes again, and Alex is made helpless. He stumbles outside after guilting his parents for abandoning him. And this
If he could have managed to punch him with that little backhand threat, that wouldn't have been a very good punch. Sorry. Being pedantic, yeah.
scene is particularly interesting as it's both the first time we see Alex interacting with the outside world, and also our first hint that the treatment really hasn't worked. Alex is perfectly fine walking past his parents' erotic artwork, and he's happy to intimidate his father in the same way he threatened him before. But when Alex's own safety is in question, the sickness comes and he's made helpless. It's not that Alex's violent and abusive tendencies and feelings have been removed, or even really covered up. Instead, his own self-preservation has been hijacked. If Alex were in a position of complete power, it's really not clear that he would be affected by the Ludovico technique at all. But as Alex starts to realize that he's not
Ludovic. Oh, of course. Ludovico. Surely that's a play on Ludwig van Beethoven. Ludovico. I could be wrong, but yeah. Sovereign's still alive. Wow. He's been alive a long time, man. Bro.
not the same man he once was, he is left wandering without anywhere to go. And here he's approached by a homeless man, and he actually gives him some money when the man asks. Although you could say this was only a way to avoid a conflict, but when Alex turns his face, the man recognizes Alex from before he was arrested. This is the same man Alex and his droogs beat up at the beginning of the movie.
Alright, fisticuffs, put him up. Put him up. Put him up.
So Alex, unable to resist, gets swarmed by the man and his friends. They beat him, kick him, and steal what little he has left. Unfortunately for Alex, the police arrive and move the homeless man along. But less unfortunately for him, the policemen are revealed as George and Dim, his ex-droogs. And once they realize who Alex is, they drop their professionalism instantly, falling back on the taunts and slang from their youth. And in one shot, we see Dim's badge number is 665, and George's is 667, making Alex in the middle of them 666.
666. No freaking doubt. Always a symbology there. Oh, whether it's numerology, symbols, whatever, it's always there. And obviously, it's oh, blooming hell, I forgot his name. He's right in front of me, I forgot his blooming name. Hold on.
Another little cryptic hint from Kubrick.
Kubrick, sorry, it went out my head for a second. Stanley Kubrick, gosh.
Alex then pleads with them, knowing what they're gonna do as he was the ringleader of these guys. But of course, they don't listen. They take him out to the country, giggling, but they beat him up with a truncheon whilst holding his head underwater. They keep him underwater for an excruciating 62
Imagine being like a gang member and that, well, going around beating the crap out of everybody and all that kind of stuff, being the biggest criminal, then turning into copper. Isn't that just symbolic though of they are criminals anyway? Coppers are. I think that's just symbolic of that.
2 seconds straight, and afterwards they abandon him in the middle of nowhere, leaving Alex to find his own way back home. Now subconsciously, Alex finds the home of the writer whose house he broke into and his wife he assaulted, so he collapses at the doorstep.
You just can't catch a break since getting out of jail, eh? Trying so hard.
And the writer's new companion, a stocky bodybuilder, carries him into the house like a little baby. When he's taken before the writer, he does get recognized, but
is that him from Rocky Horror Picture Show? Rocky.
only from the papers, because Alex wore a mask during the attack,
Big guy,
so the
isn't he?
writer doesn't really suspect a thing. In fact, he turns out that he's actually a political figure, part of the opposition against the government, so he's keen to use Alex as a weapon against the regime, and he makes sure that he can have a bath and recover. But as he's on the phone, he hears Alex singing from the bathroom. Doubtlessly exhausted, Alex has started singing the tune of Singing in the Rain. He's clearly taking joy in the memories of the assault, as he even hits the side of the tub in time with when he hit the writer and his wife. And so it should be clear by now that the Ludovico technique is deeply flawed. Alex is still a violent psychopath at heart, and he's already breaking free from his government programming. And it wasn't just Anthony Burgess, the author of the book, who figured this out. Governments across the world have known that direct control of the population's psychology isn't always that feasible, and that's why thought control today has moved past direct intervention, with corporations and governments mostly interested in engineering a more subtle kind of societal control. Now, the general idea
He does. I mean, I like this guy's videos documenting how he sets them up. He does go quite fast, like, and he goes back and forth, back and forth. It's kind of like haphazard, you know. But I still like what he has to say.
is to control people by subliminally pushing them towards certain behaviors more in line with the state's ideals. The idea came from a relatively new field of study called behavioral economics. After finding out who he really is,
Behavioral economics.
the writer then changes his plans for Alex. At first, he was going to use him as a pawn in his fight against the government's tyranny. In most other stories, this character could be different. His high-minded ideals of liberty would hold steady, even after he finds out what Alex did to him. But not in A Clockwork Orange. A Clockwork Orange is more real than that, and that's why his motivation instantly changes to revenge. And so what follows is an incredibly uncomfortable scene, where Alex is sitting down for a meal, and the writer and assistant walk into the room and offer him some wine. Now, Alex can tell something is off just from how the writer is staring at him, so he tries to put off drinking the wine, but eventually after enough pressure, he downs the whole glass. The writer then tells Alex that his
And gets knocky outed.
wife, the woman Alex assaulted, died because of the anguish. The writer's friends then arrive, and just as they're asking Alex about how the treatment conditioned him against Beethoven, as well as violence, suddenly Alex collapses. Clearly, the writer's drugged him. So when Alex wakes up, he finds out he's been locked in
Blimmin' waste of spag bog, that man. Waste of spag bog.
a room at the top of the house. The writer and his friends, who were just hours ago willing to help Alex, are now sitting a floor below blasting Beethoven's Ninth
Blasting Beethoven, try to torture him. Wow, eh? Wow, no forgiveness, eh? But he wasn't even a little bugger, so come on.
on a speaker system. This is torture for Alex, who's immediately overcome by his conditioning. He has no control over his own mind anymore. He doesn't even know what's real, so he pleads for it to stop. And that's when we see the writer literally shaking with glee at his suffering. This goes on until Alex has finally had enough and throws himself out of a conveniently unlocked window, doing clearly what the writer had always planned. Now, the symbolism in this
Broke himself up to the max.
scene is striking. One of Alex's only redeeming qualities that makes him human is his love of beauty, the arts, and Beethoven. But here, with all the government conditioning, these very things that he used to love are now destroying him, and led him to suicide. And that's why earlier on, he likened Beethoven to wine flowing in a spaceship, but now that beauty's been used to poison him. And this is the very essence of the movie. Modern society in its attempts to mold Alex into something without any free will, an avatar without any soul.
Yeah, dude, it made him an automaton. But it's completely in bondage. Completely in bondage. He had free will before. What did he do with it? Messed up. But he was completely in bondage when it came to that. I'll do that program just to get out, you know. No, thank you. No, thank you. I'll do my time if I'm in jail. But I don't intend being, obviously.
Has taken away what makes him human. It's turned him into a Clockwork Orange. A natural thing warped and altered to fit some mechanical need until its essential purpose has been wiped out, rendering him completely useless. A perfect pawn for society. And this is unfortunately the way our society is going, as we all know, and it's been on this path for quite some time. As our world progresses and evolves, it becomes less suited to people's actual lives. People get turned into data points, statistics to be nudged and manipulated. But as this process goes on, it just alienates people more. The pressure in society builds because people just don't function properly. For example, the amount of people dropping out of the system because
don't function properly. People are meant to talk to each other. People are meant to communicate. You know, people are meant to, actually say a few words to each other a day. But now people in the same room are sitting there on the phones, all on their phones, all on individual phones, and don't talk to each other. They text each other, sitting next to each other, or upstairs from each other, and downstairs from each other, next room. It's craziness. It's craziness.
of health issues has reached record levels in the UK, surpassing 2.5 million people. Mental health problems and loneliness are still rising at an unprecedented level.
Always going to rise. The world getting chaotic, more chaotic. Mental health issues are going to keep rising. Without doubt.
Also, while more and more men are more single and more sexless, birth rates are plummeting, testosterone is destroyed, and in response, governments then crack down on their people, desperately trying
That's because all the trannies want to take it.
to keep the machine running, harvesting even more of their data and watching you even closer, doubling down on control and manipulation. And new technologies promise to go even further than this. I mean, things like Neuralink and neural implants are the next
Neuralink, evil, pure evil. I mean, Moon's got to probably like it. I think it's a good thing. It helps this guy out who's handicapped, but imagine what it's going to turn into. You know, you've got to be controlled by a link in your napper. Crazy.
logical step. They can be the final level of the panopticon.
I'm looking forward to the conversation with Jesus for the Computer Gate on Platses again. That'll be his. It's always good at his AI stuff.
Because through them, they control people more closely and intimately than ever before, monitoring people's thoughts. And because you always have the thought that maybe you could be watched, you always act in a way that someone else wants you to. And this is one of the main things about AI that scares me. When everything in this world is increasingly replaced by machines and artificial thinking, society will then itself become consequently more artificial. And if we've learned anything from A Clockwork Orange, then we should...
Hasn't already, even from our technology, right? It's artificial. Down to our bodies now, you know what I mean? People are putting butt plants in, you know what I mean? Giving themselves BBLs and all that stuff, putting silicone implants in the boobs and the butt, changing their faces and all that. People are more synthetic day by day.
Expect the worst from this intrusion, making society even more cold and unfeeling towards everyone watching this. That's why you're going to start feeling more alienation and resentment if you're not already. And this will bubble up to the surface. As crime rises, people feel less safe, people feel more lonely, birth rates drop, more men are infertile, more men are sexless. This then gives rise to...
No, a lot of the geese are out there are getting gay now. They're gay now, aren't they? So less children, I suppose. It's not good. It's not good. Try to turn this into a sterile society.
To more anger in society, which in turn gives the government even more reason to be authoritarian, a dangerous cycle that we're experiencing right now. The chaos of nature still isn't much better though. A complete lack of law and order, a state of nature like Hobbes calls it, allows psychopaths like Alex to do as they please. Society needs order and rules, but only to a certain point, because when these rules start controlling and manipulating people's own thoughts directly, this then takes away an entire population's free will. And
there you go, no, he's not for it by the sounds of it. So yeah, I agree with him. I agree with him completely.
Deprives people of what makes them actually human. Instead, we need to harness an environment that lets people develop their own virtues and moral compass. In the same way that people who live in a city overflowing with trash are more likely to litter, people need some sort of goodness around them. They need something higher than themselves. And fake, phony, virtual morality isn't morality. This is just morality without a choice. You can't be a good person or do good things if your thoughts and actions are being coerced to act in a certain way. And even when society does try to take free will away, it always...
There we go, hold on, let me just go back. Just so I can say it, I need to stop. Pause
isn't morality. This is just morality without a choice. You can't be a good person or do good things if your thoughts and actions are being coerced to act in a certain way. And even when...
This guy here, going towards the tank protesting, was a Mandela effect for me. I remember him like getting run over and being a little bit messed up, you know, getting run over by a tank. Now, he doesn't anymore. It's not going to show you that, but that doesn't happen at all. Goes up to it and just tries to sit in front of it all. It all goes, and he doesn't get squished at all, man. It's crazy. I remember it.
Society does try to take free will away, it always resurfaces eventually. The pendulum swings back. Eventually, after jumping out of a window, Alex wakes up lying in a hospital bed covered in plaster casts and bandages. He's alive despite his attempt to end it all, and as he's recovering, he gets
arrogant, deprogrammed and arrogant, like with the food, yeah, more of that, cocky bugger.
Psychologically evaluated by a doctor.
What's with the purple hair? His mum and this young girl. orange cravat type thing.
Most likely to test if the Ludovico technique actually worked in the first place. When Alex responds to some of the questions with violent and sexual answers, it's clear that it's worn off. Later on, Alex is then visited by the government minister that was actually spearheading the Ludovico technique. Now the minister is obviously in some trouble because of what happened to Alex and his experiment, so he needs Alex to cooperate and back the government. And
Biggie bribey.
this finally gives Alex power again. He's finally got his free will back, and he can coerce anyone he wants. Reveling in this power, he gets the minister to feed him his dinner. The minister then
Arrogance of him.
offers Alex an easy job and a high salary, as well as the freedom to do what he likes. Alex is happy to play along, using the exact same line he gave his school officer at the beginning of the film. And so as they pose for a photo op and Beethoven plays triumphantly, Alex fantasizes about the violence and mayhem he will be able to inflict again. And this is the ending.
An orgy and everything. Dirty bugger.
A depressing vision of the world that nothing has actually changed, and that Alex is ready to embrace more cruelty and sadism once again. However, the novel it's based on has a different ending. Instead, there's another chapter
I'd like to read the novel. I've only ever seen the film a couple of times. Well, a good few times. Used to have it in like a nice little box, VHS tape. But I'd like to read the book, see what it says at the end of that one.
where Alex falls back into his old ways, but eventually meets his old Droog and accomplice Pete, who has since become a functional member of society. Alex changes his ways, growing out of violence and cruelty in favor of a new life, a new moral code. The book that
See, Kubrick wanted to keep it like he was still evil. Doesn't like the happy ending.
Kubrick worked from lacked this chapter entirely, so it's hard to say whether he intentionally
There's something about Kubrick.
left it out, but it does give us a clue that Alex has the capacity to change. He just had to do it on his own terms, not through the government mind control experiments. Alex's world and ours gives fewer and fewer people the ability to truly choose their own destiny. People are coerced into living in an artificial, standardized world, a corporate empty hellscape.
Again, it's very artificial, but even to the point of humans now. And then they're getting things like Neuralink, computers in the head, becoming very artificial, not just silicon implants. Crazy.
Sucking away your free will and ability to grow into the person that you're meant to be.
Oh, that's it. It's done. Cool. Excellent. Nice. I was just thinking, I was about to look and chat again. Forget, it's a recording. But yeah, bless you guys. I thought it was an alright thing to react to. But I'm definitely going to get some sleep now. I'll put it out as a premiere. It's an hour and 6 long at the minute, so it might take a minute or two. So I don't know what time it'll be out, but I'll be on Flats later, and I'll also be streaming tonight at 11:30 p.m. GMT. So bless you guys, love you guys, and I will see you soon. Yeah, the sunset's free. It's free, indeed. Ta-ta.